Okay, good morning to all. I'm Brendan Finn. I'm the project manager of SMARTA-NET, and I want to welcome you all to the inaugural European Rural Mobility Network event. It's the first of 7 meetings we're going to hold through to the end of 2024, as well as other events that we will schedule that you will hear about. Now, SMARTA-NET is about rural mobility. It builds on the work of the earlier SMARTA project, with an additional aspect of mobility in support of rural tourism. And it's sponsored by the European Commission, where we work with DG Move and DG Agri. Now, everyone here knows that mobility is a big issue in rural areas. And in SMARTA, we identify that it's a problem everywhere in Europe. Although quite often we think it's unique to our own locality or our country, this is a universal problem, even beyond Europe. And in contrast to mobility in urban areas, there's no specific policy about rural mobility, not at the European level, not at the national level, often not even at the regional level. And without policy, then there aren't clear goals or targets. There's no responsibility to deliver unless it's developed locally by an authority, and funding doesn't flow. The other thing we see is that the people who act on rural mobility are usually at the district, municipality, or other local level. And being rural areas, they often have limited staffing and other resources, and they're very busy people doing many things. So when they look to deal with rural mobility, they have to build up their capacity and have access to good information. SMARTA-NET looks to help in 3 ways that Andrea is going to explain now. And the first is to establish this European Rural Mobility Network, where for the first time, people working in rural mobility can hear from others, share experience and challenges, and network with each other. The second is to develop guidelines on key topics that are practical and relevant and will help you doing your job. And the third is to provide training to local actors in each of 15 countries that we will work with. This is the first Europe-wide network on rural mobility. And over the next 18 months, we want to make it a very dynamic network and to become a voice on rural mobility in Europe. I'd now like to introduce you to the SMARTA-NET team who will make this happen. You're going to get to know them over the next 2 days and into future events. We're 5 partners. We're MEMEX of Italy. We're the project coordinators. I'm Brendan Finn, the project manager, and Andrea Lorenzini is the project coordinator. He will talk to you in just a moment. We also have Giorgio Ambrosino, Eleonora Ercoli, Elena Bargagna, and Antonio Liberata. From the E40 team in Hungary, we have Edina Oxko, Anita Balak, Emesa Oxko, and Katrina Idu. Our third partner is Tish from Portugal, and here we have Andre Freitas, Luciana Pereira, Tiago Pino, Daniela Carvalho. We have NEET of Germany, who are specialists in tourism, and we have Bente Grimm, Ulrike Olsen, Ulf Sontag, and Wolfgang Gunther. And our 5th partner is Pantea of the Netherlands, and there we have Jörg Koops, Daniela Matthews, and Maria Rodriguez. I've said those names relatively quickly, but you're going to get to know all of these over this and the coming events. Over these 2 days, what we're going to do is explain what is SMARTA-NET and the Rural Mobility Network, to hear from many of our lighthouse sites and others about what they're doing in rural mobility and tourism. We will get to exchange experience and discuss with each other in 3 interactive workshops, and we will get to meet other members of this first Europe-wide community dealing with rural mobility. So welcome again, and I will now pass you to Andrea Lorenzini. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brendan. Exactly, I'm Andrea Lorenzini, technical coordinator of this project. I will just give you a short overview or introduction about this project just by sharing my screen. And I hope that now you can see it properly. Just putting it in full screen mode. Okay, so first of all, these are what we could say the housekeeping rule. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. So if you have problems with that, please get in contact with Anita Balog from the E40 team through the chat. You can keep your microphone muted until you are given the floor. You can, of course, interact. This is actually a meeting where we would like to interact with you. So if you want to say something, to ask questions, to comment, please raise your hand, and we will try to give you the floor as soon as possible. You can, of course, use the chat box to type in any question or comment you may have, and then with Edina, we will be the facilitator of this first session for the day 1. So we'll try to grasp all the questions raised and try to ask to our speaker for that. And you can also share your thought to the Twitter. This is the SMARTA-NET 23. This is the official tag for the Twitter account. And please do not hesitate to intervene into this in this meeting. So very shortly, what are we going to do throughout the morning of today and tomorrow? This is the agenda for today. There will be an introduction to the SMARTA-NET project guided by this presentation and the presentation of my colleagues. Then there will be a session on introduction to the European Rural Mobility Network facilitated by the E40 team. And then we will start to learn more about some of the presentation from the rural municipalities or region working with us, or the so-called light outside presentation. And that will be basically the agenda for the day one. Or rather on the day two, that is tomorrow morning, we would like to really enter into an in-depth discussion with all of you through a specific breakout session. There are 3 workshops planned, one on local shared mobility solution, one on sustainable tourism and mobility, and one on the inclusion of rural mobility aspect into the sustainable mobility plans. And you should have already indicated your interest into the registration form. And lastly, we will have a sort of feedback session from the working session, and then a reflection and debate guided through a panel discussion with our panelists. Closing remark and next step, and we will of course share what are the next step for this SMARTA-NET project. So very shortly, I will give you a couple of slides about the SMARTA-NET. And as said by Brendan at the beginning, what is the background of this project that is originally sponsored by the European Parliament in 2018? So basically, we are trying to carry on a legacy that is lasting for more than 6 years, but actually that started probably in the 90s, where there was the first, project dealing with on-demand transport or flexible transport service. So as you know, there is the European policy is trying to make this transport transformation inclusive, equitable, leaving no one behind. And we have made, especially on transport and mobility, very good progress on urban areas or cities, metropolitan areas, and so forth. This is the last concept or last policy initiative of the 15-minute cities. So people need to have access to services and places, location, venues, and people in 15 minutes, just by active modes, cycling or walking. And there have been many initiatives in terms of smart cities, some the white paper on transport, low emission zone that trying to facilitate that. But if we just think about rural mobility, rural transport, what has been done so far, probably, I guess all of us can recognize that much still needs to be done, because probably less has been done in the past. And what is the problem with that? What is really the problem of accessibility or transportation in rural mobility across Europe? We can start from this basic example. Is it possible today to live a daily life without a private car? And I don't know what will be your answer. Probably someone would say that would be hardly difficult, or probably I would say no. Maybe someone else would say not just with 1 car, but maybe with 2 cars or 3 cars per household. That's probably an important question. And what is the reason behind that? As already introduced, there has been a lack of policy and responsibility for rural mobility that led to limited supply of services, that in turn led to limited mobility for people without a car. And of course, this has also an impact in terms of challenges caused by poor mobility for rural inhabitants. On the one hand, for the accessibility, so how people can move across rural areas to reach different villages or to reach different towns. But then there is also a problem for urban and metropolitan areas, for example, in terms of traffic congestion caused by those commuting cars traveling from rural areas to urban areas. But there are also problems for regional member states and for the European country as a whole, because as we know, there are these decarbonization target or decarbonization goals that need to be achieved. So, reduction of carbon emission by 55%, and then by 90% by 2050. And how can we really achieve that in rural areas and rural mobility? So, as you know, the SMARTA-NET project is building on the SMARTA 1 and 2 project legacy. And this is just to let you know that you have access to a lot of insight and information that are available on the previous SMARTA website. You can have a look at that, and there is already an important amount of knowledge that has been already generated by this project. Of course, this presentation will be shared afterwards, so you can access to the link that are included there. But maybe what is important to keep in mind that our policy recommendation was that rural territories require policy frameworks that improve mobility across the European regions. So it comes the SMARTA-NET project objective that tried to take the EU policy objective and goals, especially from the 2 pillars, the European Green Deal and the long-term vision for rural areas, and try to apply that to rural mobility. So especially thinking about the 4 pillars that promote the rural development, that are connected, strong, and prosperous and resilient, we are focusing on connecting, and especially we are trying to promote sustainable and resilient mobility connection between rural areas, between remote rural areas, between remote and urban areas, and try to think how mobility can also support sustainable tourism, or what we could call ecotourism. So basically, these are the 3 main pillars. Mobility is the first, tourism is the second, but then how mobility and tourism can also support rural development. To conclude, what is doing our project? SMARTA-NET has 3 main strands. The first is the establishment of the first European rural mobility network of its kind. The network is primarily targeting rural municipalities from 15 European countries, but is also open to multipliers such as local action group, leader group, regional authorities, network association, and so forth and so on. The second strand is that we are going to develop a number of guidelines, and you will hear about that in a moment, about different topics. And the last is use the network and the guideline to implement training and capacity building activities on the guideline in each of the member countries. And what is also important to stress that we will develop it in own country and in own language for the ERMN members and other interested stakeholders. We are not doing that by alone, in the sense that we, as a SMARTA-NET, are a consortium of 5 partners, but we're also engaging with different sites across Europe, the so-called lighthouse sites, that basically has a range of tourism interests in their area and the presence of an active rural mobility scheme or willingness to develop one. We already identified 12 or 13 different sites that are already confirmed to work with us. But then we are also now having discussion with sites in Spain, France, Poland, Czech, and Romania, so that we can also ensure a good coverage of Europe. Last slide for me. What could be of interest for you? What is the main benefit of that? Of course, is just to let you know that SMARTA-NET is really trying to push or to promote or to enable the networking among yourselves. So among rural municipalities, among rural region, rural territories across Europe, who are active in rural development, rural tourism, and rural mobility. And of course, this hopefully will open different opportunities for you about networking in premise, but then also about learning, about problem solving, about maybe also convincing or lobbying, or also trying to push the issue of rural mobility at a higher policy level. So I hope this was a nice introduction for you, but of course now we will continue with that because we have a big knowledge to share. So I will now stop sharing my screen, and I would like to now give the floor to the presenter of the guidance, that will be my colleagues from MEMEX, from TISH, and from NET. So thank you for your attention.